me thank you all for coming out. The issue that we're dealing with today is the issue of national priorities, is the issue of what kind of country we are and what kind of country we want to be. The issue is whether we are satisfied that 3 people in this country today own more wealth than the bottom half of America. The issue is whether we are satisfied that we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth, and the gap between the very, very rich and the middle class is growing wider and wider. The issue that we are dealing with is whether we are content to have a country in which 30 million people have no health insurance, even more are underinsured, and we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. That's the issue that we're dealing with. What this bill is about is giving 83% of the tax breaks to the top 1% at the end of 10 years, and then coming back to the American people and saying the deficit is so high that we got to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and education. So our job is not only to repeal the tax breaks that went to the large corporations and to the wealthy. Our job is to transform our national priorities. Our job is to say that instead of giving tax breaks to billionaires, we're going to raise the amount of money that seniors on Social Security get. Our job is to say that instead of allowing corporations to place their money in the Cayman Islands and not pay a nickel in federal taxes, we're going to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure and make sure that every kid in this country, regardless of income, can get the college education that he or she needs. So of all the absurd things that the right-wing Republican leadership has done, I would say this ranks close to the top. The idea that when we have massive income and wealth inequality, they want to give tax breaks to billionaires and then cut programs that the middle class, that the elderly, the children, the sick, and the poor need is morally reprehensible. And you know what? They are not going to get away with that because the American people are catching on. We're going to vote them out in November. We're going to transform our national priorities. We're going to make this institution start working for the working families of this country, not just the 1%. Thank you all for what you're doing.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Next, we're going to hear from Representative Lloyd Doggett. He's from Texas, and he has served in the House since 1995, and he is also the ranking member on the House Subcommittee on Tax Policy. Please welcome Representative Doggett.
So it's tax day for everybody here, for millions of Americans across our country lining up, getting their taxes paid. They're paying their fair share of the cost of having the greatest democracy in the world for our national security and our domestic security. But you know, these Trump Republicans, for some of those at the top, for some of our largest multinational corporations, they've converted tax day into tax break day. And for them, it's a time of jubilation up on Wall Street as they report all these great earnings as a result of not paying their fair share for the same national security that you're paying a fair share of. They've disguised as tax relief for working families, something that 83% at the end of this decade will go to those in the top 1%. Those are the people that at that time will be earning almost $1 million each year, and they get the bonanza. Just a few minutes ago, in front of our committee over here in the Longworth building, we had Trump's Treasury Secretary, and like all those Trumpettes, they're all out boasting and bragging about how great this tax bill is. He talked about the many people that had already gotten a bonus. But when I started doing the calculations, using his numbers, it comes out to about 97.5% of Americans who haven't gotten a dime of bonus. Of course, those people up at the top, if you're a CEO, and of course, if you're a CEO, you're already doing fairly well. You get paid 235 times what the average worker gets paid on the average. But if you're a CEO, you probably got one of those bonuses. But most people didn't get anything, and we're going to hear from someone in just a little bit who got a little bonus and then a big outsourcing of his job, so he got laid off because of the outsourcing incentives in this bill. What about that promise from Trump that we were going to get $4,000 increase this year and every year in the average family income? Has anybody here gotten their $4,000 yet? I doubt you've gotten your $4,500 that the Treasury Secretary would be forthcoming. No, it's just your typical Republican bait and switch, where you help those at the top and forget everybody else. Of course, the real cost that Americans will pay from this bill is not what is not in your pocket today, but what might not be in the future of America. The outsourcing of jobs, and we have legislation to correct that, and that is really important to get done. But to also know how we're going to drain resources from this bill from where we need to be investing, and that's investing in the American people. The little provision that they stuck in our conference committee without any discussion beforehand provided a tax break just for those at the top that neither the House nor the Senate had previously proposed. And that tax bill and its cost alone will be about the same amount as what Trump proposes to cut in his budget from higher education financing. As with so many other places, if this bill stays in effect and we don't make changes in it, it will have a big negative impact on our economy, on our competitiveness, and our ability to grow. You might say to Mr. Trump, you keep this in place, and it'll be not only you who has a stormy problem, but a stormy American future. Let's reverse it. Thank you.
So over the last few months, we've been touring the country holding Trump tax town halls and teach-ins, talking to people about what's in the bill and why it's not going to help them. And one of the congressional representatives that we've had the pleasure of doing some of these events with is going to come speak to us now. From Arizona's 3rd Congressional District, please welcome Representative Rahul Grahava.
Thank you very much, and kind of difficult to follow Doggett's last little slogan on this. I told him that too. I hate that. There's a reckoning coming. Let me talk about that, because the senators and Mr. Doggett and the people that will follow are going to go as to the reasons that we're here. The tax scam, the cuts that were passed by the Republicans, and the benefits that it accrued for people like the president, $11 million in tax breaks because of this. The Koch brothers, who spent $100 million disinforming and lying to the American people about what this tax cuts meant and what that tax scam meant to them, and laying a false picture out. $1 billion. In Citizens United. And that's what they'll gain from this. And the list goes on. That 1% acquiring 83% of the benefit from these tax cuts. That's not America. And the reckoning is coming, because Americans sees this, through the cloud, through the lies, and through the disinformation. And what they see is that there is no fairness. And what they see is that there has to be a change. And November is coming, and that's the reckoning. The reckoning to make a fair tax system that takes care of working people and that invest in the children of this country, that invest in making sure that our educators and teachers are paid a livable, sustainable wage when they are in that classroom teaching our children, to invest in Social Security, and not to use this tax cuts as an excuse to decimate programs that the American people rely on. That is what the American people know, and the reckoning is coming. And the opportunity for new leadership to take this tax scam, not only revisit it, but repeal the portions of that, if not all, and begin anew with a tax reform that implies, not by just language, but is explicit about the idea of reform. Reform, everybody paying their fair share, investing in the American people, and taking this country from where we are right now to where we need to be consistent with our values. Fair, honest, transparent, and for the general public good. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is a New Yorker, so I don't think he's going to mince too many words. Please welcome the chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, Representative Joe Crowley.
I want to thank everyone for being here on this chilly spring day. Fired up and ready to go. You know, the Trump's billionaires first tax scam. And that's what it is, a tax scam. Not a tax cut, a tax scam. It does nothing to help working men and women in this country. It is the greatest bait and switch I've seen in my years here in Washington. He promised to help working men and women. He lied. He promised that he would have a better way. He lied. Not unusual about this president. The overwhelming benefits have gone towards the wealthiest 1% in our nation and the wealthiest corporations in the history of the world. They got a tax break, and a permanent tax break. The biggest bait and switch in the history of our country. And we simply cannot stand by and allow it to rest. The Republican caucus needs to announce that it will repeal and replace this bill. This is the bill that needs to be repealed and replaced. They are focused on health care. Repeal this bill, my Republican colleagues. I sit on the Ways and Means Committee, and I heard one of my colleagues talk about the fact that he's doing a lot of soul searching after he voted for this tax scam. Doing a lot of soul searching. You know what this is all a pretense to? And I'm told Dr. Simone is, Sister Simone, Sister Simone is here. And I suppose, Sister, we have to assume as people of faith that they may have souls, but they didn't demonstrate it when they passed this bill. Because what this is all a setup for is so they can go after Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That's the setup. That's what this is all about. And we're not going to let them do that because we have children, we have veterans, we have students, we have working families that need a real break. And this bill does not deliver on that. So we're not going to rest. And when we take back the House, we'll repeal and we'll replace this bill. Thank you all.
Sister Simone is, in fact, here. I think she just got another degree added to her name. That's fine. That's fine. She deserves it. This is a tireless advocate on behalf of those who do not have a voice. Not only is she a sister, but she is the executive director of Network and is a social justice warrior. Please welcome my friend, Sister Simone Campbell.
What an honor to be here on a day that I wished was more a happier day, a day of joy, a day of feeling like we're contributing to the common good as we pay our taxes. But I have to say, as I paid mine, I looked at it and said, what happened to the common good? Why aren't we paying taxes saying we believe in education? Why aren't we paying our taxes saying we're committed to those who are left out? Why are we not paying our taxes saying we're committed to highways and infrastructure and caring for our planet and doing all of the things we care about for our nation and for our world? This tax policy is bad policy. It's bait and switch. It's a scam. But more than that, it's taking the heart out of our nation. I, as a person of faith, am here on this policy because it is preying on our worst selves. It is challenging us to only think of me and mine. How much of a tax break did I get? I'm sorry. Pope Francis has made it abundantly clear last week that holiness, faith, engagement in a faith journey requires the commitment to the common good, not to the individual good only. So I stand up here saying, I'm calling on a few people to act in a holy fashion. Isn't that a radical tax rallying cry? Be holy. Be holy and care for the common good. Be holy and care for each other. Be holy and insist that everyone in our beloved nation, the richest nation on earth, has access to health care, has access to quality education, has access to affordable, quality broadband service in our nation, because everybody needs to be connected. So, we at Network, we're standing with you all to say, we can do this. I learned something about the fight during the fight for the Affordable Care Act, protecting it. You can keep fighting even after something is passed. I learned that you can keep whittling away. I learned that we can stay engaged, and that in the end, what we learned in the healthcare fight is that the needs of the people do triumph. So let us stand together, fight for the common good, and ensure that we have reasonable revenue to pay for our amazingly responsible programs and care for our entire nation, not just those who think they're in charge. Thank you.
Yes. Stop the tax scam! Stop the tax scam! Stop the tax scam! Stop the tax scam!
So one of the things that Sister Simone brought up is healthcare. And one of the objectives of this tax bill is to really attack Americans' access to affordable care and affordable health insurance. And so it gives me so much honor to bring our next speaker to the stage. She is the woman responsible for the Affordable Care Act. She is the first and only woman ever to be Speaker of the House, and dare I say, she won't be the last. Please welcome Representative Nancy Pelosi.
Good afternoon, everyone, and it is now afternoon. I am honored to be here with each and every one of you because I see many familiar faces. Faces that were there a year ago when we all came together across the country, many places, to ask for the president to release his tax returns. A year later, still hasn't happened, but in the course of that time, all of you, so many of you here, and certainly some of us under the leadership of Nicole Gill, and not one penny, let's hear for Nicole, have been having events across the country. So many of us came together to protect the Affordable Care Act, and then when it got to be winter and we had to fight their tax scam, they won the vote, but they did not win the hearts and minds of the American people. And why? Because of all of you. Whether it was the little lobbyists, whether it was our friends in the labor movement, whether it was advocates for health care across our country, Nicole Gill and her tribe of people across the country. Right now, yesterday they said it's a political loser. The public does not believe that it is in their interest. And that is because of all of you. It's a scam. And why is it a scam? Look at this. They put forth a tax bill that gives 83% of the benefits to the top 1%. They try to call it a middle-class tax cut, and yet 86 million middle-class families in the life of this bill will be paying more taxes. They caused giving corporate America $1.5 trillion dollar tax break, tax cut, and plus interest, taking us over $2 trillion further into debt, mortgaging our children's future, placing a dark cloud over, putting a dark cloud over a dark cloud over this Capitol, over our budget. So then they say, well, we have to make cuts because we've increased the debt. So we're going to take $1 trillion out of Medicaid. Isn't that obscene? $500 billion out of Medicare. And Heather Booth knows this. Where's Heather? There she is. I just saw her. Heather knows this when her tax cuts for the rich and corporations, while they take $500 billion out of Medicare. Now, this is consistent with them because they have said Medicare should wither on the vine. They have had in their budget that Medicare should eliminate the guarantee and instead be a voucher. That's what they are. And in that further, in that budget, trillion Medicaid cut, $500 billion for Medicare. Then they go on to take $200 billion from food stamps, $100 billion from education, hurting our children and their future. Now, Sister Simone talked about Pope Francis, beautiful Pope Francis. I'll talk about Pope Benedict. In Pope Benedict's first encyclical called God is Love, he quotes his favorite saint, St. Augustine. And in God is Love, the encyclical, he quotes Augustine as saying, 17 centuries ago, 1,700 years ago, St. Augustine said, any government that does not exist to promote justice is just a bunch of thieves.
That's right.
17 centuries ago. Benedict goes on to say sometimes it's a challenge to define justice, but in doing so, we must beware of the dazzling blindness of special interest money and power.
Amen.
Is that today? Is that today?
We need a 50-state strategy.
So what we need is the American people to know, and that is what you are doing, a drumbeat across America to say, this is not about our values. A budget is supposed to be a statement of our national values. What is important to us as a nation should be how we invest in our children's future, in the retirement of our seniors, in the air that our kids breathe, in the opportunities in the economy and the rest. Be fair. Fairness. That's not what this budget is about. It's a shame. It's wrong. It's wrong. And we cannot let it stand. We won't 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 let it stand. So thank you all very much for what you are doing to make sure it doesn't stand. Not only that tax cut doesn't stand, but also the budget that they have proposed that is so lacking in values. So thank you all again to the little lobbyists, to our friends in labor, to all of the supporters here, to Nicole Gill and Not One Penny. Thank you all very much.
We won't let it stand. We won't let it stand. We won't let it stand.
Our next speaker, we're going to take a little bit of a different track, and we're going to welcome somebody who doesn't serve in Congress but serves his family as a father and a husband and takes care of his children, one of whom has a congenital heart defect and requires an extensive amount of medications and surgical procedures and is now thriving. But he's going to talk to us about what these cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and the cost of prescription drugs mean to him and his family. Please welcome from Arizona, Steve Gomez.
Good afternoon. It's morning where I'm at. My son Anthony was born in September of 2015 with a condition known as transposition of the greater arteries. Corrective heart procedure was performed 2 weeks after he was born, but was unsuccessful, requiring we had to list him for a heart transplant. So 4 weeks later, at 6 weeks old, we were notified that another family had been strong enough, to gift our little boy another chance at life. And he spent the next 12 hours in the OR receiving his new heart. The transplant was successful, and it looked like things were turning around for our little man. However, as a side effect of the life support he was on while awaiting transplant, he had to undergo a number of amputations to his hands and feet. Through all of this, Anthony has remained amazingly happy, almost annoyingly happy, and energetic. He loves playing and roughhousing with me and his older brother and mom, and is on his way to walking and running everywhere. However, our routine revolves around his follow-up appointments and especially his medication schedule. When we first came home from the hospital, he had 14 medications that totaled a number of 31 dosages throughout all hours of the day and night. Fortunately, we're now down to 7 medications and 11 dosages, but most of these will likely be for the rest of his life. Last year alone, we spent well over $3,000 out of pocket on prescription medications for Anthony, and the only reason it was so low was because we readily met our deductible early in the year thanks to multiple ER visits. This year, we're in the same boat with regards to our deductible and on track to spend even more on prescription drugs. While I feel the insurance carriers are definitely not without their part in this, I think a huge blame should be shouldered by the pharmaceutical companies and the benefits they receive since Trump tax was passed.
Yeah, I know, that's right. It is a scam. It's a scam.
The tax scam benefited wealthy corporations immensely, and the drug companies probably more than most. The big pharmaceutical companies have announced massive bonuses and payouts to shareholders and executives since the Trump tax plan is passed, and that's just unacceptable.
Unacceptable.
Not a single one of these companies used that tax cut to lower drug prices to families like ours, further proving that rewarding the wealthy does not trickle down to the average American family. In fact, drug companies have announced hundreds of price increases, many exceeding their so-called social contracts of no more than 10%. The Trump tax plan not only provides massive benefits for corporations like Trump's and the large pharmaceutical companies, it's doing all of this while stripping away health care from American families. By repealing the individual mandate of the ACA, millions of Americans are denied access to affordable health care. In addition, the CBO has stated that premium increases as a result of Trump tax will most likely be at a rate of 10% annually for many years to come. This plan was pushed through, was pushed through in secrecy under the guise that it would help American families, but it's no secret now that it was set up to benefit wealthy corporations, nor why.
No hearing, shame.
According to the Center for Responsive Politics, 19 members of the House and Senate received contributions of $100,000 or more from pharmaceutical or health product companies.
Shame.
The GOP and Trump lied to all of us when they said this would help American families struggling with health care costs.
We got to run in all 435 House districts.
While these corporations and Trump's friends get richer, they're leaving kids like Anthony and families like mine behind, and this scam needs to be stopped.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your time.
Stop the scam. 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 Stop the scam.
Our next speaker is Representative Jamie Raskin from right here in Maryland.
Hey, hello. Hello, Tax March. Anybody here from the 8th Congressional District in Maryland? All right, well, welcome, and welcome to my constituent Elena Hung, who I think you're about to hear from. So he wouldn't show us his taxes, but he showed us his tax policy, and it's a nightmare for America. Probably almost as much of a nightmare as his taxes are. But we don't know because he's broken from a half century of precedent by not disclosing his taxes to the American people. But we're going to work on that one too. We're going to make that happen. But their tax bill last year was H.R. 1. And that was a good designation for it because it was a bill for the top 1% of the American people. And now it's the law of the land. Their tax ripoff, their tax scam in H.R. 1% added $2.3 trillion to the national debt, which is now their excuse, their pretext for trying to shred Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. Are you going to lie down and let the GOP and these big corporations roll all over you? That's the question today. We're not going to do it. Under their tax plan, 13 million Americans will lose health care coverage, including people on Medicaid, on employer plans, and on the individual market. And the health care premiums are going to jump up dramatically for everybody else in the country. They say the only two certain things in life are death and taxes, and the Trump administration wants to combine them together, okay? They said they were going to drain the swamp. They just moved into the swamp and drained the Treasury instead. 83% of the benefit of their tax scam goes to the top 1% of the people, and 86 million real American families are getting socked with a tax increase because of their policy. So our job is to go out and tell the people and then vote them out.
Vote them out.
Thank you very much.
Vote them out. Vote them out. Vote them out. Vote them out.
Thank you, Congressman Raskin. I'm so excited about our next speaker. She is very familiar to many of you who have been fighting against the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. Her name is Elena Hung. She is the co-chair of the Healthcare Voter Campaign, and she is the co-founder and co-president of Little Lobbyists, an organization that advocates for children with complex medical needs, including her own daughter, Xiomara. So please welcome Elena and Xiomara to the stage.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Oh, let me move this out. I'm not that tall. Hi, I am Elena Hung. I am a mom. I'm here with my amazing daughter, Xiomara. I'm here on behalf of families like mine, the Little Lobbyists, families with children with complex medical needs. And we've been coming to Capitol Hill, fighting for our kids to make sure that they have the health care they need to survive and thrive. And the tax bill that this Congress just passed threatens all of that. Those who voted for this tax bill gave trillions in tax cuts to the wealthy. They voted to add $1.8 trillion to the national debt. And we know how they will try to pay off this debt. They told us they are coming after Medicaid. So, I am here because I believe that members of Congress need to hear the stories and see the faces of those affected by their votes. And there are millions affected by their votes. This is my story. 3.5 years ago, I had a great pregnancy and an amazing birth. And then 15 minutes after she was born, my daughter Xiomara was rushed to the NICU, where she remained for the next 5 months. The next 169 days, to be exact. And since then, she has seen over a dozen specialists and had countless medical procedures. She uses a tracheostomy and a ventilator to breathe and a feeding tube for all of her nutrition. But I am thrilled to tell you that Xiomara is thriving today. She is alive and thriving today because of the amazing medical care that she has received. She is alive and thriving today in great part because of Medicaid. Medicaid pays for her therapies, her physical therapy, her occupational therapy, her speech therapy, her feeding therapy. Medicaid pays for the inclusive special education program that Xiomara attends at the local public school. Medicaid pays for the services and supports in the community so children like Xiomara can live at home with their families and not in institutions far, far away. Medicaid helps children with complex medical needs survive and thrive. Medicaid helps their families survive. Medicaid helps moms like me sleep better at night, knowing that our government is watching out for our babies. So I'm here to say thank you, Medicaid. And I'm here to say not one penny for corporations and the wealthy at the expense of our children's future. And I am here to say I am a health care voter. And families with children with complex medical needs are health care voters.
Yes, we are.
Families who rely on Medicaid are health care voters.
Yes, we are.
Do we have any health care voters here today? So I'm here to say, members of Congress, make no mistake, when you come after our kids, health care voters are coming after you. All right. Thank you.
Vote them out! 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 Vote them out!
Thank you, Elena and Xiomara. She's waving goodbye. Very cute. Our next speaker is from California, where I hope it's warmer there than it is here today. Please welcome Representative Mark Takano.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Elena Hung, for sharing your story. Thank you. And thank you all for coming out into this really warm spring day. Well, today we are speaking out not just for ourselves, but for the millions of Americans all across this country who know a scam when they see one. And let's be clear, the GOP tax bill is a scam.
Yes, it is.
When a nearly $2 trillion tax cut gives 83% of the benefits to the wealthiest 1% of Americans, that is a scam. When a tax cut for corporations takes priority over investing in our schools, rebuilding our infrastructure, or making health care more affordable for the middle class families, that is a... And when Americans say that we can afford a giant tax, when Republicans say that we can afford a giant tax cut for the rich, but we can't afford Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security, that is a scam. Not only is it a scam, it is a total moral failure. And here's why. Here's why. We have a wonderful caregiver benefits program that supports families of disabled veterans who need round-the-clock care. The program is grounded in the idea that these families should only worry about caring for a wounded warrior. They shouldn't have to worry about monthly bills stacking up or keeping food on the table. But this program is only available to post-9/11 veterans. Now, as a member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, I've been fighting to make caregiver benefits to all veterans of every generation.
Thank you.
The cost of doing that is $4 billion over 5 years. And I've been told that that is too expensive. The cost of the Republicans' corporate tax cut is $1.3 trillion. So we can give $1.3 trillion to corporations, but we can't give $4 billion to veteran caregivers?
That's a shame.
Is there any morality in that?
No!
Now listen to this. A good education is key to a successful future. Do you agree?
Absolutely, yes.
Well, the new House Republican higher education bill cuts $15 billion from federal financial aid that makes college affordable for low-income students. So, $1.3 trillion more for corporations and a $15 billion cut for low-income students. Is there any morality in that?
No!
Republicans want veterans and students to pay for a corporate tax cut. But even more than that, here's what they really want. They want us to forget. In the coming weeks, months, and years, when they say we can't afford funding, we can't afford to keep funding for Medicare, they want us to forget that they passed a massive tax cut for the wealthiest 1%. When they say we can't afford to keep funding Medicaid, they want us to forget that they gave their donors more than $1 trillion in tax cuts. And when they say we can't afford Social Security, a program that all of you paid for, they want us to forget this tax scam.
We won't forget.
So, will we forget?
No!
Will we forget?
No!
Will we forget?
No!
That's right. We will not forget, and we will hold them accountable. Thank you, and we will vote them out.
Vote them out! 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 Vote them out!
Thank you, Representative Takano. Let's give him one more round of applause. That was great. Our next speaker is a fellow member of Little Lobbyists and is also a healthcare voter. She's also an educator and stands up for the rights of her fellow teachers and fights for the rights of her son who has complex medical needs. Please welcome Christy Judd.
Hi, my name is Christy Judd, and it was just mentioned, I am a little lobbyist, I'm a healthcare voter, and I'm a teacher. But most importantly, I'm the mother of a 9-year-old son with very complex medical needs. At this moment, actually, the moment Ethan was born, my entire world changed. You see, Ethan has an orphan disease called congenital myasthenic syndrome, a neuromuscular disorder. You most likely have never heard of it, but that's okay. Neither have most doctors. Ethan was initially misdiagnosed, and moments after he was born, while in the recovery room from an emergency C-section, we were told that Ethan would not survive. Fortunately, that diagnosis was incorrect, and Ethan is now 9 years old. Ethan is a third grader, and he's a happy, healthy little boy who lives with a gastric tube, which helps supplement his nutritional needs, and also has a tracheostomy and uses mechanical ventilation at night. He uses a walker to access his typical third grade classroom, and he's an A student when it comes to spelling. He's an average little boy, but the way he has gotten here is because of access to medical care. This tax bill is threatening my son's access to care, and I cannot be silent. While Ethan is able to do all the things that he does, horseback riding, piano lessons, take in a museum, and most importantly, attend school like any other 9-year-old boy, it's because of his access to both Medicaid and private health insurance. The only way Ethan can attend school safely is with a nurse who is trained to care and respond for his medical emergencies with a tracheostomy. Private health insurance will not cover that cost. He is able to attend both physical and occupational therapy because Medicaid helps with the copays. He has a wheelchair, a walker, because Medicaid helps with the copay. Ethan is medically complex, but because of his access to Medicaid as a result of a special program, he is a very typical 9-year-old boy. Ethan is probably returning to his classroom from lunch right at this very moment and will rest during recess today because he has PT and OT after school. The cot that Ethan rests on was purchased by his first grade teacher. She also bought him a blanket and a pillow. Yeah, it was the sweetest thing, and it brings tears to my eyes just thinking about it. They love him, and they wanted him to feel like any other third grader, any other first grader in their classroom. She and a second grade teacher worked tirelessly to ensure that every activity in their classroom was accessible to Ethan. And that's a challenge because he is physically limited. But it wasn't a question of will Ethan be able to participate, it's how will we modify the activity. These teachers go above and beyond. And as a result of that, I stand with them as they fight to ensure a living wage so that they too can take care of their families. Ethan is fortunate to have such amazing teachers because with just a short drive across state lines from West Virginia into Virginia or Maryland, they would be able to make a much higher wage. But they choose to stay within their communities and take care of my child and all the children that are living in our community. As a result of that, when our local teachers took part in a 9-day work stoppage, I stood with those teachers.
Hats off to y'all. Hats off.
In a state where education is in such a crisis, it's Medicaid that helps offset the costs for schools to provide the services that are necessary for my son Ethan or for children like Ziamara. Medicaid helps ensure that providing those children services, other children aren't being denied anything. Without access to Medicaid, I would not be able to work and contribute to my local economy. The cost of Ethan's Medicare would shift from our private insurance entirely to the Medicaid program. Access to care is essential for people who are medically complex, and cuts to Medicaid will endanger or take away that access. Medicaid is so important to my life and my son's life that the new tax law that we're here protesting puts Medicaid at risk. Earlier this year, I stood with teachers striking in West Virginia. For the majority of Ethan's life, I've been standing by my son to defend his health care. From the moment he was born, the 8 months he lived in the hospital, and every day since. And now I have to stand and defend my son against the lawmakers who are trying to take away his access to care, the access that guarantees him a normal life. Ethan is one of just 564,000 West Virginians that depend on Medicaid or CHIPS in West Virginia. Without access, all of their lives are at risk. Medical emergencies and terminal illnesses are better treated early or prevented. Let's face it, no one schedules cancer or a heart attack. My family did not sign up for a rare disease. There's nothing we could have done to prevent it, but Ethan deserves to have the best possible life. And with Medicaid, he has that opportunity. Thank you.
Right. Out. Vote them out. Vote them out. Vote them out. Vote them out.
Thank you, Christy. That was such a powerful story. I also want to just give a shout out to all the teachers out there in West Virginia and beyond. Yeah. Our next speaker is from Minnesota, Minnesota's 5th Congressional District. You may know him as the Deputy Chair of the Democratic National Committee. Please welcome Representative Keith Ellison.
Hey, everybody, what's up? How y'all doing out there? Y'all, I'm glad to hear you fired up because let me tell you, come rain, come shine, come hot weather, or come cold, we have got to stand up and fight for the best interests of this country because them other guys, they doing something else. Now, let me tell y'all, there's been a lot of excellent conversation, especially I want to thank folks who are not politicians who've come here to share what their perspective is on this thing. It's critically important that we get the human side of this tax scam. And I want to thank my elected friends, too, because they know firsthand why they voted no, and so they should tell you about it. But I want to talk about a provision that we, I think, need to highlight a little bit more, and that is that when they passed this thing, they made a provision so that the corporate tax rate would be 21%, lowered from 35%, but the profits made from offshore subsidiaries would be as high as 10% and lower than that. Now, if you are making a product in the United States and they tell you that if you make it here, 21%, you make it there, half, then they are going to move that plant and make that product elsewhere where they can exploit workers in other countries. Now, the bottom line is this guy came in talking about he didn't like TPP. Oh, I guess that changed. Did y'all hear just last week he said he liked it again? Shocking that Trump lied, huh? But the bottom line is these guys have set it up so that they're offshoring jobs. I mean, look, if you are a CEO of a company, you know that in American law, you have an obligation to maximize profits. If you don't, shareholders can sue you. You know that, right? They can sue you if you don't maximize profits. That's the way they set this system up. So, like, you could be saying, I want to keep jobs in America, but somebody's going to say, hey, you could be making me more money if you offshored. What do you think they're going to do? This is what they wrote into the bill so that they can try to exploit labor all over the world. Don't be surprised if somebody in another country ends up with a job that used to be done here. It is this tax bill that is driving that. And as a matter of fact, you might think, oh, well, at least I'm comforted by the fact that somebody else somewhere else got a job. Well, not so fast. Because since NAFTA, payment and pay in Mexico has dropped about 13%. How is that? Well, they got no labor rights, they got no environmental laws, and they got a very shaky democracy. And so if they don't want to pay you over there, guess what? You just don't end up getting paid. Mexico has seen its pay drop, its wages go down 13%. So not only will people in the United States lose their jobs, people in other countries may get a job that they work less for with fewer rights and might even get shot and killed if they try to form a union. So the problem with this tax bill, we have got to make sure that we fight it at every point. We've got to make sure we fight it at every source. Don't cut taxes for corporations that send jobs offshore. That is exactly what this bill has done. That is exactly what it has done, and we will fight against them every time. And let me just wrap up by saying this. They're going to tell you, oh, cutting taxes, that's going to give more money to big companies so they can hire more of y'all. We know the trickle-down has always been a lie. It's been a lie, but even since December when they passed it, they have merged, and they have bought stock buybacks, and they have done just about everything except for take care of the American worker. They threw out a little bribes here and there, but we know now the lion's share is going elsewhere, and they are putting us out of work, and we are going to fight this thing tooth and nail, and we will absolutely remember in November, but every single day of the year. Let's get out there and fight, everybody.
Vote them out. Vote them out. Vote them out. Next, all the way from Chicago, Representative Jan Schakowsky.
So I am so proud to see all of you out here. It's a cold and kind of nasty day, but you know what? You represent the 75% of Americans who know it is a tax scam that the Republicans gave us. So when I ask you, how do you feel today? You shout it out for them. You say powerful. How do you feel today? Powerful. And you are. We're going to win this battle. So, you know, the Republicans, the top corporate leaders, rich people are celebrating today. But their time is limited. This is a sad day for workers, and the majority of people in this country know what's going on. Instead of creating good jobs for Americans, the Republican tax bill is actually encouraging, and you've heard it time and time again, multinational corporations to move their jobs overseas. Shame. Shame. Instead of boosting workers' wages, those corporations are buying back stock and paying out dividends to shareholders. Shame. Instead of reducing income inequality in our country, the Republican tax bill widens the gap for the richest 1% by giving them 83% of the tax breaks. Shame! Instead of raising revenue to invest in infrastructure, education, and health care, Republican tax bill puts Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid at risk. Shame! Workers and their families were scammed by the GOP, and they know it. And only 1 in 4 Americans think that Republican tax bill was a good idea. So Americans deserve better. Yes. They deserve a better deal. Yeah. We need a tax code that raises taxes on the rich, ends incentives for corporations to outsource American jobs, and supports working families. Look, we are the richest country in the world. Don't let them ever say that there's not enough money to do these things. There's plenty of money. And this is the richest moment in history. Now, the United States of America overall has never been richer. But we have the money to invest in our future through quality education, through affordable health care, and through a world-class infrastructure. The money is there. We can only do it if we demand that corporate CEOs and their multinational corporations pay their fair share. Thank you.
All right. Vote them out. Vote them out. Vote them out. Vote them out.
I'm sensing a theme here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Our next speaker is a D.C. native. She is a proud member of SEIU 32BJ.